So essentially, YouTube never works out. So what I mean by that, is I have an idea, I make a plan, and it doesn't go according to plan, obviously.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the KoreKara Podcast. In this episode, we interview Johannes from Japanese Journey. On his channel, he posts high-quality informational videos about anything and everything Japan. Some of his most viewed videos include how to survive Japanese toilets as well as what is Wagyu. He even talks about how you could work in Japan, such as through his how to get an IT job in Japan video. But today we go and talk to him about the behind the scenes about how he actually got to Japan, his journey learning Japanese, or should I say Japanese journey, as well as what it's like working a full-time job in IT while doing YouTube at the same time. Also, before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to our Kohai and above level patrons, Salt Shaker, Jack, Miku, Azenga71, and Boy No Eyebrow 4. If you want to personally support the podcast, check out our Patreon where we post bonus clips, exclusive episodes, and early access to full episodes. If you like the podcast, please make sure to like and subscribe as it will help us out a lot in making more content. Hope you guys enjoy! Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the KoreKara Podcast, where we go and look at different aspects of Japan with people who know what they're talking about. I'm Raza, and I'm joined by my co-host Eric, and this week we have a very special guest. We have Johannes from Japanese Journey.
Yeah, so I first saw Johannes' videos when I discovered his intro to MIA video. And by that time I was already following MIA, but it was really good to see like someone with like really professional like filming skills and a really good YouTube channel like explain what MIA is in a really clear way. And then through that, I discovered his other videos, like his like how to get an IT job, because I also went to school for in that field. But Johannes is a working professional in the IT industry in Japan, and he has a family in Japan and has been in Japan for quite a long time now. And his YouTube channel is really successful. But today we're hoping to get a closer look behind who the man is behind the YouTube channel. So, like, Johannes, can you give us a quick bio behind where you are and where you're at today?
Okay, thanks for having me. So I am today in Yokohama, where I'm living right now. So I used to work in Tokyo, but since Corona started, I'm working from home, from Yokohama now. And for my background, so I've moved to Japan in 2016, so 4 years ago. I don't know if that's quite a long time really, but so for some time I've been living here. I started this YouTube channel also just after I arrived to Japan in September 2016. And my main focus is two things. One is explaining Japan to foreigners. And the other thing is sharing facts about Japan. So not so much travel and so on as many others maybe do, but more, let's say, an approach that's fitting for an IT person maybe.
So what actually got you to Japan initially? Because you did come from Germany, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I didn't have an actual connection to Japan as far as I remember until I started martial arts. So initially I was into Chinese martial arts, like starting from Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee and so on, like maybe many do. And then one of my mother's friends was teaching Aikido in the town I lived, and she said, okay, now you're talking about this so much, now go. Essentially, she pushed me there. Then that's when I was 17 in 2004. And then through that, so step by step, I started to get into it. I was kind of on the edge for a little bit. I started in September, and I wanted to kind of quit. But then at Christmas, my mom gave me a dogi, so like a proper gear. Before that, I've been getting it from teacher every time. And then I was like, okay, well, then I continue a little more. And then after some time, I took the first test and something clicked then. And then I started to get in it way more. So then from like once a week, then twice a week, then 3 times and so on. And I started studying in Munich. That's a little bit of a bigger city. And then started like 4 times, 5 times because there are more training opportunities. And through that, then I got also into Japan because Aikido in Japan. Aikido is a Japanese martial art and it's connected. So that's how it started. And then, so my teacher's teacher, my first teacher's teacher was a Japanese man. And my first teacher then took me to him when he was visiting Munich. And through that then I decided to, at some point I don't know why I decided that, but I decided to go to Japan for one of the seminars that were here. And the seminar was in 2009. So that was then my first time when I came to Japan.
And for like a quick background for maybe listeners who don't know too much of Aikido, can you give like a quick background of the martial art itself?
Okay. So the background, it's rather new, so it's a little hard to pinpoint the date, but when it was first called Aikido, it was around after the Second World War. So still rather new. The founder of Aikido trained in a variety of martial arts. The most prominent one was Taito-ryu, which is a style of jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu. And so Aikido has a wide variety of teachers, and all of them are different. So it's hard to pinpoint a specific style. Some of them are very soft right now, which some people say, okay, that's not even martial arts anymore, that's more like dance or so. And others are very, let's say, more strict. And so there's a wide variety of what's out there. And mainly it's based on throws and pins. So if that makes any sense. But for me, it's just a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in my environment, I don't expect to be attacked at any given time. So it's more like being active, having fun, and so on.
I see. And now, I guess going back to your first seminar in Japan. So what was the big takeaway from that first trip? What was your, I guess, main memory actually getting to Japan that first time around?
So I thought it was really great. So it was kind of the first trip I did on my own where I actually had enough money. So that alone was a great experience. Like, you can travel, and if you bring enough money, it's really fun. Because before that it was like, okay, I travel, but I can barely survive. So it's like always a struggle. But so that was one thing. And then about Japan itself, it was quite different, but it was also pretty nice because I think it's a great country for coming here as a tourist. Mm-hmm. So if you come as a tourist and you then don't bring all your problems, essentially, because it's vacation and you don't have to struggle for work or anything and do like crazy hours or anything like that, it's really great. Like, people are really polite, at least if you don't understand the details of how people behave, then it's like, oh wow, everybody's smiling and everybody is being polite and so on. And so half of my time there was in a seminar in Nagano in the mountains. That was so great. So essentially my first time experiencing onsen, Japanese hot spring. So like every day, maybe 2 or 3 times I went to the onsen. Then of course, so the setting is that's in Togari Onsen, that's close to Nozawa Onsen, if this says anything to anybody. The setting is in the mountains. We have a hotel just for us, and then connected to the hotel is the training hall. So it's like you're just there. You train, you eat, you go to the onsen, and you sleep, and then you drink also a lot. That's kind of connected to Japanese martial arts. So that was a great experience. And then after that, we had like 5 days or so in Tokyo, where we went to training a little bit again, but also explored a lot. And what I do remember is, what do I remember? So I do remember we went to an Italian restaurant. I don't know why. And it was the sizes of the food were so small. So essentially, because I'm from Germany, which is close to Italy, we are used to like German or European or whatever sizes, which is like enough, I guess. But then we came here, and also Italian. It was Italian food, but it was Japanese size, so like super small. That's like kind of the things I remember mostly. But it's also been a little while, so.
Did you have any sort of like affinity for the Japanese language at that time? Were you interested in studying it?
And so before I came, I had no idea about Japanese at all. And then somebody had like a cheat sheet for like basic Japanese phrases with German pronunciation written down, like, which probably wasn't the cleanest, but it was interesting. And with some other participants, I decided, okay, now we learn Japanese. Nothing happened after that, but that was like my first start into the language, kind of.
Mm.
So I think the only sentence I remembered was "Toire wa doko desu ka?" So where's the toilet? Which is, of course, not helpful if you don't understand what the other person is replying.
Yeah, a lot of ways that can go wrong. So I guess after this big pivotal trip, after going to Japan for the first time, you mentioned on your website that you tried to go back to Japan many times afterwards, but were unable to do so. So could you talk a little bit about like why that was the case?
I don't actually remember. I don't know why I wrote it on the web page. But so I'm not really so because I wrote it a while back as well, like 2015 maybe 26. Yeah. So anyway, let me try to recollect something. So I remember, maybe you can cut out this first part now. So usually there was like a seminar in Japan every 2 years. So 2007, then in 2009, I thought, okay, I was in my bachelor's, so I thought now is the time to go because after 2 years I will be writing my master's thesis, so I don't have time. So I went. Then my thesis got a little bit delayed, so I could have gone again, but then there was the earthquake and the disaster in Fukushima, and the seminar was cancelled, and all the following seminars were cancelled as well. Because my teacher said, the Japanese teacher said it's not safe enough in Japan. He doesn't want the foreigners to come for him. So that happened. And then I didn't go for quite some time until then later in 2014 when I first visited my now wife.
I see. And speaking about your wife, you actually met her in Germany, right? In an Aikido seminar, right?
That's correct. So it's a little bit, we need to be a little bit, I need to define something here. So I met her before in actually at this seminar in Japan, but I got to know her in Germany. So at this seminar in Japan, she lived in Nagano city and she visited for 2 days or so. And I thought, oh, that's like a crazy Japanese girl. That was my impression. So her idea, she came with her girlfriend. She came with a friend, a female friend. That's what you say, right? She came with a friend, and they thought for some reason they're foreigners, so we have to teach them some kind of samurai behavior. And the way to do this is to have a ponytail on the top of your head, like samurai. So they had like ponytail up on the head, and I was like, "What are they doing?" That's what was my impression, and they were like very Japanese, like Japanese young girls, as you may imagine them, like yeah, and things like that. So I thought essentially crazy Japanese girls, didn't communicate too much with them. And then in 2013, I went to the seminar in Germany and they also came. For some reason, my teacher picked me up, the German teacher picked me up, and then we went to the airport to pick them up. He has been given the task. And I was sick, so I was like, And then they arrived, like obviously jet lagged and so on. So it was like, I don't know. I remembered the names and didn't remember their faces. This was kind of my first impression. It's like, oh yeah, that's them. And then we went there to the seminar place, and it's essentially like there's nothing around. So it's you almost secluded place, and you're with the same people for 1 week. And yeah, in 1 week, then you get to know each other. And then after that, we kept in contact. So during the seminar, I still had another girlfriend and she had a boyfriend. But then 2 days after the seminar, I didn't have a girlfriend. And then soon after, she also didn't have a boyfriend. And then we kept in contact, like I said, and Skyped every week at least. And then in November 2014, I finally visited her in Japan.
I see. And this next visit to Japan,
Yes.
Was this the moment where you kind of envisioned yourself living here, actually beginning a Japanese journey, or was it more of a tourist experience once again?
No, so yeah, kind of mixed. So it was, I visited her parents already, so we stayed at her parents' house. She was living with her parents at that time. So it was not necessarily too touristy. It was more like getting to know your girlfriend's parents. It's not necessarily the most fun, but it wasn't too bad. And we also went like to Kanazawa and did a little bit some trips, but not too touristy, but also not too I want to live in Japan either. So it's like I come for this girl. That's it. And I didn't imagine myself living in Japan back then. So back then our plan was I come to visit her a couple of times more, and then eventually I take her with me to Germany, and then we live in Germany, which is what we did for a year.
I see. And I guess you did end up going back to Japan one more time after that, right? But I guess throughout this entire process of your relationship, was there any difficulties in terms of maybe cultural barriers?
So initially, maybe not. I mean, there obviously was the language barrier because my wife didn't speak English too much and no German. So we used the English we had, and then she learned German a bit. So we switched to German, and then I started learning Japanese. So then we switched to Japanese, and now we're speaking Japanese all the time. So this barrier is kind of gone, but still there's a lot. So especially once you start really communicating, then you get to understand more. And some things are like cleanliness. I mean, not in the... I would say cleanliness and what's connected to that. So things like toilet slippers and so on. So when you go to the toilet, then it's... Even though it has been cleaned just now, it's a dirty place. So you change your shoes and so on. And it continues. Like many things like that, which I wouldn't ever consider. And she's like, what are you doing? And then connecting with that is maybe what I feel is the excessive use of plastic in Japan, not reusable plastics, like packaging everything and having it beautiful and neat and so on. And also this idea of recreating things, which maybe comes from Shintoism, which is, I think, also plays into this abusive use of plastic, in my opinion. That's some of the things that I found a little bit surprising.
So I guess now you've been practicing Japanese for a while, right? So you mentioned communicating fully through Japanese. So how is it like starting out and now to the point where you are today? How long has it been?
That's a good question. So I think I started in 2014 probably when I started to communicate with her. But starting means like maybe 1 hour a week, if I'm lucky. I started with like a totally only audio method called the Michelle Thomas method, which gives you like a classroom setting. There's a native English speaker that explains everything. Then there are 2 other students. One is pretty bad, one's pretty good. And then there's a native Japanese person who repeats everything the English teacher is explaining so that you get like a Japanese experience and can like try to mimic the Japanese pronunciation. Now in hindsight, I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it. Now that I'm using the MIA, so mass immersion approach. However, since I focused on mimicking the pronunciation of the Japanese speaker, I think it could have helped me, but I'm not too sure. So I'm not sure if I would go the same way again. And then once I did that, I had like very basic. It says it's like 2 parts. The first part is called Total Japanese. Second part is Perfect Japanese. But of course, it's like first part is 8 hours and the second part is 4 hours. So it's like 12 hours of Japanese classroom experience in quotation marks. And obviously, it's not perfect. It's like you can say very basic things, and that's it. Still, I used a little bit when I came to Japan the first time when visiting her. And then after that, I got Genki, I think when she came to Germany. So that was in summer 2015. So like already a lot of time in between. And I also, but before getting Genki, I also learned the kana using James Hasek. So remembering the kana, which was pretty easy. It took like 6 hours for hiragana and katakana, I think. And after that, I did Genki and James Hasek for remembering the kanji. And it also at a very slow pace. So I could say life got in the way, but maybe I wouldn't say I was too lazy, but maybe I didn't have to use Japanese enough. to be inspired enough to learn a lot. And this continued essentially, more or less, like, it was always like up and down, like learning a lot and then not at all and so on, until now when Corona started. So when Corona started, around the same time, I switched my position at my job, where I'm now much more exposed to mainly Japanese-speaking people. So I thought, okay, if I want to make this work, if I really want to be able to perform best at my work, and if I at least consider staying in Japan for a long time, then I should now sit down, take the time I have because of the coronavirus, and invest it into Japanese. So since then, it's gotten to be more consistent.
So how's your Japanese level today? And do you have goals for the future?
I think it's still not great. So obviously, I started maybe March or something like that. I think it's still not great. And personally, since I don't make update videos or something like that, it's hard to see the progress because you're with yourself every day. So you you learn 2 words or something, but then if you look back, then actually I guess you see it. My goals for the future. So it's hard to say. That's what I want to say. It's hard to say where I am right now. My goals for the future is that's a good question. So I'd never defined goals for the future. I'm kind of in between. I really want to be great at this. Like, not native level, I know it's unrealistic, but like at least very, very fluent for a lot of subjects, to kind of a level where I want to be. And so when I say fluent, then I mean not only fluent in being able to have a conversation, but also be like have the pronunciation that matches what I know. And then on the other side, I have where I think, okay, maybe it's enough if I focus on being able to understand everything and being understood, but not so much on pronunciation and so on. But I'm leaning towards the pronunciation part, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Nice.
So essentially, when for Japanese, I follow essentially 2 approaches. One is the one from Matt versus Japan, which is MIA. And then also I've been supporting Dogen for a long time, who's teaching Japanese phonetics on Patreon. So I've been following since he has had like 6,000 subscribers or something. So very early. And so there's a little bit of a difference. So Matt says, get the kanji in, then get like the first couple of thousand words and so on. And it's like about a year or so until he recommends you get into phonetics. And Dogen says, okay, if you have like Genki 1 and 2, then start. Like 6 months in, you should get into phonetics as soon as possible. And you can delay kanji because your phonetic abilities will decline as you age. And kanji is something you just repeat it and then you get it after some time. So this is the kind of 2. I'm not too much into phonetics right now, so I guess I'm following Matt's approach a little more. But yeah, at some point, I have to invest some time.
And also, like, how much Japanese do you actually use for your work job?
Not too much. So 2 reasons. One, I'm trying to be understood as well as I can, which currently is better in English. And 2, so MIA, Mass Immersion Approach, doesn't recommend to output too early. So I take this as an excuse to essentially not speak too much at work. But if I have to, I do.
I see. And now I guess going back to how you actually started your Japanese journey. So you mentioned going back to Germany for a year, but there was like a pivotal moment that kind of led you to there and kind of going back to Japan, right?
Yes. I mean, pivotal moment. Was it one moment? I don't know. So at some point, my wife said, I always thought we would live in Germany, and my wife loved it because she loved it from when she visited. But obviously, actually living there and visiting are 2 different things. And at some point, she said, yeah, if I was to visit Japan now, I wouldn't come back. I was like, what? so then we had some discussions and eventually decided to go to Japan for a year as well, because we have been to Germany for a year. And okay, it's just fair to go back to Japan as well. So it wasn't like one moment, but but certainly have been some revelations, and it's eventually we decided to do that. And then obviously the 1 year became a little bit longer, so still here. So
and now I guess really starting at the start of your Japanese journey, where did you see, I guess, the biggest difficulty in terms of adjusting? Because your wife had some difficulties when actually living in Germany, but now this was your time actually living in Japan.
So I think what I didn't consider to hit me as hard was, maybe I would call it loneliness. So essentially, because I'm very well embedded socially in Germany, obviously, so I have my friends, I have my family, and so on, so I have a very good connection to all of my family. And in Japan, they aren't here. So I have my wife's family, which I have a little bit of conversation issues with at the time because of my Japanese level. And that's it. So, and back then I worked from home, so I didn't have. So I had a company in Germany, and I took it with me to Japan and worked for German clients in the beginning. So I worked for them. I didn't go out to my day job or something and talk with colleagues or something that would have helped me socially. So I think this was what hit me the most. And then obviously you're different, so which can be a positive thing, which can be a negative thing, but it's definitely something different. You're different. So in Germany you fit in, and it's kind of diverse culture, but Japan is not, and even more so in the countryside. So we lived in Nagano City for the first 1.5 years. So you stand out. Sometimes kids look at you and say, "Oh, there's an American." For some reason, white guy. Okay, he's American. Happened like 2-3 times. But I still remember in the first week or so after I arrived there, we went to a department store, and there was like traditional music. I don't know what it was, like koto or shamisen or something. And then we watched a little bit, and then the performer made like a break and said she was so happy that even a foreigner came to listen. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, personally, we've gone through that many times as well, so we completely understand how you must have felt there. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned a little bit about your job from Germany there and working for German clients. So how did you kind of transition from that job into actually working in Japan? And you mentioned that you had actually had a video where you posted about how to get an IT job in Japan, which was very helpful. If any of you guys haven't seen that, you should go check it out on Johannes' channel. But
Definitely.
How did you how did you kind of transition into that?
So like I said, I work for German clients, but the time difference is like 8 or 7 hours, depending on the daylight savings time. So at some point, it didn't work out too well anymore. So getting new clients didn't work out so well. So I started looking for a job in Japan, and that's all essentially. So eventually I found a nice company, went there, and because the company's in Tokyo, we also went here. So we moved away from Nagano, like I said, about 1.5 years in. And since then, I've been working in this field. So so my professional background is Android development, so mobile applications for the Android platform. And I started as an Android engineer, Android architect actually. So like technical team lead for the Android development. And then eventually, after 9 months or so, I started on overseeing a little bit more technically, not only Android but also other components like iOS and so on. And then eventually, I became the manager of the team, which is like my current position, in which as I mentioned before, I have to talk to more Japanese people. So now my position is engineering manager, and that's also why where I think I'm in a position where I can give at least some tips about how to behave to get an IT job, how to behave to get past the first or so interviews.
I see. And what was the sort of breakup in your team in terms of Japanese to foreigners? Did you interact a lot with foreigners, or were there many Japanese people in your team that spoke English?
So when I started, I was the first foreigner. So my team was pretty small back then. It was like I was the fourth member, so the other three were Japanese. But soon after that, it started to change. So now we are still, I think, 3 or so Japanese, but 7, 8 foreigners.
I see. And coming from Germany and working in the same field, how did you kind of see, was there a difference in the Japanese working environment, working style, or maybe just something different in the specific field itself in terms of Android development?
So it's a little bit hard to say. One, because the company is very international. Like I said, my team is pretty international. I think more of the department even is like 60% or so international. And two, I've never been employed in Germany. So I was always self-employed. So it's a little bit, not apples to apples, comparing that. But I didn't actually, I mean, obviously there's a Japanese element, which is like a little, let's say, so the way I work is very direct. And that doesn't go too well with some Japanese that are very like I'd say not too straight to the point sometimes, like talk around a lot and use a lot of words that I would describe as fluff. I would like to cut away, but that's how it is. And so that's definitely there. So, and a lot of, let's say, there's not too much risk taking. So some people are afraid to make decisions if they are in the middle management position or so. Which I feel wouldn't happen so much in Germany.
Did you find the interview process different for in Germany versus Japan?
So again, since I haven't been employed in Germany, so I have applied for a couple of freelance positions, and not too different, I think.
Well, I guess what I mean is, I know like in most of the Western world, like technical interviews are a major part of for a like IT position. So like whether that's like a coding technical question or like a system designs question. But I heard that they might not emphasize that as much for Japanese tech related companies.
Yes. So I got both. I got some that were pretty technical in the first interview, like you do a quick self-introduction and then you just go to the drawing board and write some code on the wall. And then I also had some where we just talked. Like, okay, did you do this? Okay, yes, okay, can you do this? And then it's like, okay, you passed, which was surprising. So I think they're both. So I would say the more international-oriented companies might have more focus on coding ability and technical, like actually showing your technical skills on the whiteboard, whereas more traditional companies might have like just a talking interview.
I see.
Now, almost 4 or 5 years into, I guess 4 years into the job, do you feel like you're in a good spot here? Do you want to keep going in terms of, I guess, IT and go to your max? Or now with YouTube, is it more of something you want to do concurrently or maybe one or the other?
I like both. So IT is definitely still a challenge, especially now that I changed positions. So that's there, but also YouTube is. So essentially, YouTube never works out. So what I mean by that, is I have an idea, I make a plan, and it doesn't go according to plan, obviously. So I miss a shot that doesn't turn out as good as I thought, or something gets in the way always. And then I have to work around it. So there's always problem solving when making YouTube videos as well. So it's both still challenging and it's both something I like, and they get in the way of each other. So obviously work has priority because it brings the bread on the table. It brings in the money. So if I'm busy at work, I can't work on YouTube so much, which does hurt my consistency. So especially in the first year when I started this current job, which was 2018, I had like only 6 or so uploads in the whole year. So I still feel this. I think at least I still feel this when it comes to views. So in the beginning of the year it was pretty good, and then it's like, oh, you don't upload, and then went down with the views. But well, that's how it is. I mean, have to prioritize. Personally, I mean, I wouldn't mind working on YouTube full time if that's the question. But I also understand that IT is much more secure, and since I have I'm not alone anymore. So I have my wife and my kids, so I have to take care of them. So currently I prefer safety when it comes to finance.
I guess speaking to your job right now, though, how would you say the work-life balance is in terms of, I guess, working on YouTube? Because again, if you have too much on your plate at work, then it's very difficult to do YouTube. But
yes.
In general, what would you say it's like?
So in general, at my job, it's okay most of the time. So sometimes when you have a big release or something, then that's a lot. So then I would say I clock Japanese hours, or what you would consider then. I think the worst I did was like 17 hours a day, twice in a row.
Oh, wow.
But that's like really, really exception. So this happened only once in this 2.5 years that I'm working for this company. But usually it's like I don't work too much. I do like 8 hours, 1 hour break. So 9 hours in total. And then, yeah, maybe up to 1 hour of overtime a day, but not excessively like you would have heard in the news or so. Usually. I mean, if there's like, also now when I worked more on the product and was really directly responsible technically, then I might have worked a little more. Then maybe it was like 10 hours a day or so, but still not like at a point where I would die.
Yeah, that's always great to hear.
Yeah, and especially now I don't have to commute anymore at the moment, at least. So it's even better. So it's like I go from my bedroom to this room and I'm at work.
You made it.
Yeah.
I guess now shifting to your YouTube though. So you started it back when you came here, and as well as your blog. So what was your initial goal towards what you wanted it to be? It was maybe difficult in terms of consistency in the beginning, but that still stayed strong to this day. And what has kind of been driving you, and what was that goal that started it all?
So initially I started this blog. One, I wanted to focus on Japan because I found I like Japan, happened to like Japan. And so I thought, okay, let's share a little bit. I have some knowledge. I've been to Japan a couple of times, so let's share. This was actually just before I moved. And I also started learning Japanese, so I thought, okay, that's why Japanese journey, actually, not Japan journey or something like that. So actually Japanese because of the language Japanese. And so I thought, okay, I essentially make a challenge every week. So I want to learn I want to go through this amount of Genki chapters and learn this amount of kanji and so on. So this was the start. And then obviously I wanted to make some money. So I had a blog focused on Android development before, which was kind of okay. So I would say successful, and also got some income from that. So I thought, okay, let's make the same for Japan, and then hopefully eventually make some money and sell some ads and so on. And that didn't work out. So then I thought, okay, how can I get different streams to come to my webpage and so on. And eventually that led me to YouTube. So that's how I started the first video, which was like 2 months after I arrived in Japan. Originally, I wanted to make a video about our apartment, like apartment tour, because I knew, okay, everybody's watching that. That's a great start. And my wife said, no, that privacy, you don't do that. So then I did a video about Japanese toilets, which also turned out to work well. So that was the start. And then I still thought, okay, the first video was kind of okay. Like the beginning was slow, but then I thought, I broke it down into like different GIFs and posted it to Imager. I don't know if you don't know that. It's like an image sharing platform. And from that, I got like a couple of hundred views because it got to the front page. So on Imager itself, it was like viewed like, I don't know, 250,000 times or so. And from that, I got like maybe 500 views on YouTube. And my first 18 subscribers. So 18, not 80. And based on that, I thought, okay, give me 3 months, then I'll be at 10,000 subscribers. And then slowly I can transition into being a full-time YouTuber. Mm-hmm. That was my initial plan. Obviously, it didn't work out. So now, after almost 4 years, I'm at like 17,000 something. So it did take a little longer after all. And while of course being a full-time YouTuber would still be nice, it's like financially absolutely not. I cannot expect this to happen in the next 10 years or so.
How long did it actually take at the beginning before you made your first dollar from this Japanese blog on YouTube?
So from the blog, I didn't make anything, and from YouTube, it was probably the first month or so, because back then there was no barrier for being monetized. You just said, "Okay, I'm monetized."
Oh, I see.
And if you didn't have any strikes or anything, and I think you had to have, I don't know, maybe entered your phone number or something to your Google account, and then you could just monetize. And since I got a couple of hundred views, it's like for my channel in the beginning, it was like 1,000 views equaled $1. So pretty soon, let's say probably first month or so, I made the first dollar. But it didn't grow as fast as I would have hoped.
And what was your favorite, I guess, experience making like one of these videos, or maybe traveling to a specific location to film one of your videos?
So I think I have two. So first of all, like I mentioned, the channel is not so much about travel. So I don't have too many locations I went to, but I think two stick out. One is I did a video with a friend, also from Germany, called If You Can Maybe Believe That. And he visited me, and then we said, okay, in Japan there's something called Sandai Wagyu, which is the three great Wagyu brands, which is Kobe beef and Matsusaka beef, and the third one is a little bit of a debate, but we decided it's Yonezawa beef. So there are like three that claim this spot, but we said it's Yonezawa. And we said, okay, we go throughout Japan and we eat all this beef in the places where it's made, I mean, quotation marks. So we went to Kobe, we went to Matsusaka, and then to Yonezawa to eat the beef, and then decide which one is best. This was pretty nice, so great experience. And then the other one is in the place where we had the seminar, which I mentioned at the beginning. I came there a couple of more times, and the last time I went was last December, and then I also shot a video, which is not released yet, because it was part of 10 things you should do when you come to Japan, or must do things. And then the coronavirus happened and I couldn't finish it. So I have like 4 things on my list shot and 6 are still open. But this was like, I think if I had to pick 2, that would be the ones I like.
All right. Speaking to that list, what would have been next up to go check out?
So let me think if I remember. So it was like, so what I talked about for this one was countryside, visiting a ryokan, and going to an onsen, which is like 3 on this list. So this in the countryside is a ryokan and it has an onsen. And since we were the only ones in the hotel and we know the owner, I could film there. And then what were the others? So I think one was visiting a shrine and a temple to get this contrast and also understand a little bit more maybe. Then I think going on one of the observation decks in Tokyo and grasp the size of the city. Which is, I mean, for me, when I was in Tokyo Tower the first time in 2014, it was really like, wow, this is really big. I can't see the end of the houses, like it's never ending. And then I think going to a Japanese garden or something, like one of the big 3, like Kenroku-en or so. And then what was the others? Probably have to think a little bit. So I don't remember.
No, it's okay.
I have a script somewhere, but...
I see. And I guess like now, kind of reevaluating your channel now, where do you kind of see yourself maybe in a year or so? Because now you've had a lot more, your uploads have been great. You've been making a very diversified content, really putting through the facts that you kind of want to let come through. And I mean, personally, I think it's been very informative. And do you want to, what do you kind of see for you next so far?
So my goal, so I don't have a goal when it comes to subscriber count because it's kind of not in my hands. Mm-hmm. But my goal is to, at least until the end of the year, upload once a week, which is pretty tough to do given my schedule. So essentially I only work on YouTube when the kids are asleep, which means now in the morning between like 5 and 7, and then in the evening like from 8. Which is not too much time, so it will be a challenge, but that's my goal for the end of the year. And then I have to see what happens, so based on that and where I am. So generally, I would like to go more into the traveling direction eventually. So I want to show, but not only places. So places is one thing, but I think what really makes the places are the people. So, for example, this owner of the ryokan that I know, I would like to talk to her and show what it's like to own a ryokan and so on, and go into this direction. So that's one thing. And then eventually, of course, it would be nice to work with somebody else to help me produce more content faster, which is both expensive. So traveling and then hiring somebody takes money. So don't know when this will happen, but that's my plan for the future.
Mm-hmm. Speaking to your busy schedule, so in the beginning of the podcast, we mentioned your hobbies, such as practicing Aikido. And
Yes.
I've seen you also do a lot of cooking in your videos as well. So, so how have your kind of hobbies kind of played into your schedule, and like in terms of are you still able to spend a good amount of time going and doing them?
No, especially not. So especially now, so Aikido is very close and contacty. So currently it's out of the question. I mean, most dojo, so the places where you practice, are still open or opening again, but I'm a little bit more cautious because I have family and so on. So currently it's out of the question. And before that, I used to teach once a week, but that was about it. So I imagined actually when I come to Japan, obviously I will train a lot because it's Japan and it's Aikido and it's Japanese. But then I got kids, so obviously it takes some time and will change your schedule. So currently I'm not at my full potential when it comes to that. And for cooking, I just do that when I have to. So that's not actually a hobby. It's like just, okay, I have to survive, so I cook.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
And I guess like in addition to your hobbies, you mentioned like your wife and then your kids. Has it been what has it been like having a family in Japan?
So I feel I could. So I think it's been obviously having kids and so on is great, but it's also pretty tough. And it's even tougher, I think, if you're not completely, if you're not native to the environment. So if you don't know a lot of the processes and so on, like for example, your kids get born, what do you have to do? Where should you go? Like, do you have to go somewhere and tell somebody I have a kid, and where do you get a passport and things like that? So that's tough. Then obviously I live in Japan. And my wife is Japanese, and she's taking care of the kids, and I work. So they're mostly exposed to Japan and Japanese. They're mostly exposed to Japanese, if that's what I want to say. So they speak Japanese better than German, which is a little bit, I feel like a missed opportunity. Maybe for them, eventually. So it's not... So that's the one side. Then on the other hand, of course, for my wife, it's much easier to raise the kids here. And my mother-in-law is also here, who supports a lot, and my kids love her. So yeah, there's two sides of the coin. I feel from my side I could give more when if I was in Germany. I mean, obviously because I'm German, but then it would be much harder for my wife. So yeah, it's not a black and white thing.
Have you thought about whether or not you would send them to international school?
Yes, but so international schools in Japan are pretty pricey. So there's a German school which is like $1,400 per month. That's like $1,400 or so. Which is so in Germany school is free. So coming from Germany, it's like unacceptable for me. And also it's like maybe for the first kid it would be okay financially, but then for the second one we also would have to go the same route, and that's currently not feasible. However, they're not going to school right now. They're still too young, so they're still kindergarten and pre-kindergarten.
In terms of, I guess, language, so you guys mainly speak Japanese at home, but do you talk to your kids in English or German as well?
So to my younger one, I only talk in German, and to my older one, it depends. So if I want to be understood, then usually gets Japanese, but if I get angry, it becomes German. Maybe that's not the best connection for them to have to German. Yeah, but generally, so usually I try to read German books and so on, but he's like, no, I want Japanese and things like that. But sometimes it still works. So especially if my wife is not available because she would read the Japanese books, then he's like, okay, let's do German.
I see. And what's one way you've grown like personally in terms of being a parent in a country where you recently moved to now 4 years? How has that been like, and what have you really learned about yourself?
So I don't know if that's about the country specifically, but the responsibility definitely changes a lot. So I don't know if that's me or if that's German, but generally Germans, I would say Germans, have the tendency to say, okay, if I don't have to do it, then I don't do it. As in, okay, I ate something, I put my dishes here, and then if my wife takes care later, like, I don't do it. But then, like, that's not pretty nice, even in Germany, and B, that's not very appreciated here. Maybe even less than in Germany, I would say. I mean, when I think about it and when I talk about it now, it makes sense to not do that anywhere in the world, probably, and that's at least what I realized here. And then obviously when you have kids, then it's on a completely other level because you're a role model. So you should behave in a way that you would like them to behave. And then a lot changes, probably. Like, I don't want them to watch TV all the time, so I can't watch TV.
I see. And going further than that now, kind of going towards YouTube and not so much. We've talked about what your future goals for it are, but you've been doing it for a little while now. And what's one thing that you've grown through that entire journey through your YouTube channel?
So I think I can speak better now. So especially when it comes to, so when you take a look at my first videos, then you will realize like two things. One is I cut too early, so I don't keep the tension essentially with the camera long enough. So I say something that I think, yes, it's done, and I look at the screen of the camera, so my eyes go to the side. So you see that in the first couple of videos, which is something I learned. So essentially keeping the tension. And two is you will hear that my voice is way too low. So I'm like more introverted maybe from the way I express myself. And I think that changed because of being in front of the camera a lot. I did a lot of public talking actually before that. But when you have a camera and you have to see yourself once you shot everything for a really long time because you edit, and then you realize what you do wrong pretty quickly.
And do you have any advice for anyone who might be wanting to go down maybe the same path as you in terms of maybe coming to Japan, or in terms of wanting to go and start an IT job in Japan, similar footsteps to you, something that you would have maybe told yourself when you came here in the beginning? So when I came in the beginning, I probably should have invested, or I should have gotten into a job earlier, because socially it's really good. So compared to being at home and not meeting people. I mean, now maybe it's an exception because of the current situation, but generally having people you have to contact and interact with from the get-go is a good thing, I think, if you're in a foreign culture. I mean, similarly, maybe if you study in Japan or something, then it's the same. Like you have your other studying colleagues. I don't know what you call it in English, sorry. Your university colleagues. So I think that's a good thing from the get-go. And then as for getting a job, if I had to pinpoint one, it's probably tough. I would say experience. If you don't want to be in this, if you don't want to have this new grad Japanese experience, where you have to look for jobs and essentially be the lowest in the food chain, then experience. So get experience in some way, do open source projects and so on. So essentially, boost your profile. So one thing, when I look at a CV, then usually, I have two of the same age, and one has more experience than the other, because the other one took a master's degree. Then I put the master's degree to the side. So experience is worth more usually.
in my opinion.
Well, you guys heard the man. If you guys want to go, if you guys want to get that job, make sure you have the experience to back it up, and maybe check out his channel to go see some more on how to do it. But I think this is a good place to wrap up the podcast. Johannes, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Really thank you so much for your insights. It was really valuable, and I think it's going to help one person and even then some. So thank you so much for coming on. And we'll go link all Johannes's links in the description. So make sure to check him out. So he has great content, very high quality. And if you want to know anything about facts about Japan or information, he's got you covered. So thank you so much. Johannes, we were wondering, do you have a message to the KoreKara listeners?
If you haven't already, please subscribe to the KoreKara Podcast.
Love to hear it. Hey guys, thanks for making it all the way to the end of the podcast. If you made it this far, make sure to comment which Japan-related YouTuber you would like to see next on the KoreKara Podcast. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and remember to like and subscribe for the YouTube algorithm. If you want to personally support us, you can go ahead and check out our Patreon page, where we post exclusive episodes, give early access, and more. If you want to go and talk to us, be sure to join our Discord, where you can interact with not only us, but the rest of the KoreKara community. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'll see you guys next week. Peace!